All right, welcome back to the studio again. And boy, oh boy, do I have a story for you today. If you like a mixture of economics, farming, homesteading, eggs, and conspiracy theories, then you're going to love today's video. Because over the last week, I've been seeing in all sorts of social media platforms, from YouTube to TikTok and Twitter and all sorts of mainstream media platforms, all about eggs. So there's a big discussion going on at the moment about eggs, but there's also a lot of very unusual things happening with eggs as well. And the big one, which we're going to get into, is that all of a sudden, chickens right across America just stopped laying eggs between October, November, and December.
Here's a chicken conspiracy for you that's not really a conspiracy. It's being confirmed not only here in our house, but apparently all over the nation. And nobody said anything about it because we all just assumed it was winter. They stopped laying in the winter as much. And come to find out that everybody across the nation stopped getting eggs from their chickens altogether.
And I know what some of you are thinking, well, Neil, that's normal. Chickens just stop laying eggs when it's in winter. They don't tend to produce as many eggs. And then the more expert people will start telling me, Neil, do you know that a chicken needs 14 hours of daylight per day to make an egg, and all these sort of things. We're not talking about this. We're talking about something very, very strange. And the finger has been pointed towards the feed supply of chickens. So in today's video, we're going to look at that and a whole host of other things around this egg-spiracy to find out what exactly is going on with the egg supply and with chickens. And I took the liberty today to go to the local supermarket. So these aren't my eggs or anything like that. I went to the supermarket because I wanted to find out just how much do eggs cost now, because I saw one report of organic eggs in California selling for up to $18 for a dozen. And that was funny when I saw that last week, or strange, because I was in Southeast Asia last week, because, I've been there for the month, and a dozen eggs cost nothing over there. I mean, it was absolute peanuts. And I come back, and here's another unusual thing I'll tell you. So I bought these eggs here, and these were listed as medium-size eggs. And these were about £2, so £2 for 6, so half a dozen, which is very, very expensive. I remember not long ago, you could get a pack of eggs like this for less than £1. Prices have definitely gone up, but I'll tell you what other thing has happened: shrinkflation. So these are supposed to be medium-sized eggs. They are not. These are small eggs. So what they're doing as well is they're repackaging medium-sized eggs as large eggs, and they're taking large eggs and they're calling them extra large, and then they're taking small and calling them medium. So there's a lot of manipulation going on at the moment with the eggs, but I want to get into a couple of the main talking points then, because we know what the sort of government message being put out is, and that is that because of this influenza, this bird flu going around, there is a shortage of eggs because so many birds have died from the bird flu. Firstly, this is not correct. The majority, 95% of the birds that have died were culled. They didn't die from the bird flu like everyone's saying. They were actually, if let's say you detected one bird with bird flu in the flock, the farmer would then just cull the entire flock. And there is insurance or there's compensation from the government and things like that. So that is why that is being done. There's no conspiracy there. But what they're also not saying is that the other reason these things are so expensive now and in short supply is because you've got a lot of other things with it. Yes, you've had the bird flu going around. You've had the culling of a lot of birds. You also had the feed costs going up so much, so a lot of farmers didn't repopulate their flocks. You've also got the transport costs. You've got, like I just mentioned there, the feed costs, and we're going to get into feeds because there is a theory going around, which I actually don't buy into, and I'm going to show you why, that they have added, these things, injections, but RNA-based stuff to the chicken feed. Now, I'll tell you why I don't believe that is the case, although there is strong evidence for it. I think this is a lot more simple, and it's to do with money, let's just say that. So we'll wrap that up in the conclusion when I bring everything together, And I did go a little further. Most people are just looking into the company and the feed. I've actually looked into the parent company and, okay, who makes the feed there? Who's the parent company there? And when you link it all back, it looks as though it's all to do with money, which is pretty normal for these situations. So I want to show you first what's been circulating then. Let's get onto the shared screen here. All over Twitter, you've seen, and this was a big one from the Hodge twins. So what's the deal with chickens not laying eggs all of a sudden? Rumor is that mRNA is being added to commercial chicken feed. Anybody have details? So there's a big long thread. Loads of people are giving their opinion, a lot of chicken farmers. I've read through most of the comments and I've made my decision as to what I think is going on. But this is quite interesting. There's a few videos here. Our farm stores ran out of feed in July. It was back in stock about 2 weeks later at twice the price. That's when they stopped laying. Okay, so key thing here, everything ran out of stock. It took about 2 weeks for this new stock of feed to come in. And then all of a sudden, everyone's birds stopped laying. After months of no eggs, weight loss, odd behavior, a few deaths, I started homemade feed. Next day, I was getting eggs. It lasts 3 times longer. Now, this isn't isolated because I know there's a lot of skeptics who will say, Neil, I don't buy into any of this. It's winter and all the other things. But actually, I've looked into all of these comments and there does seem to be some evidence behind it. It's not just 1 or 2 people. It's a whole forum of people, homesteaders to chicken farmers who produce a lot of eggs. And it's not just that. We're going to talk about the fires that are taking place as well. Yet again, another coincidence, an egg. I mean, this is what baffles me. How does an egg factory burn down? I mean, are eggs really that flammable? But all of these people on all these forums who, and again, there's a lot of homesteaders as well, they've all reported the same thing with 2 types of feed. The chickens just stopped laying eggs. So I think there's definitely some legitimacy behind these claims. I just don't think it's exactly what some people are saying it is. So you've got all of these videos, and again, they're on TikTok, they're on Twitter. This is quite an interesting one from this lady. There's just so many of these videos and they're all saying the same thing. It was when they switched to this new feed.
Everybody's reporting end of September to like mid-October, the chickens stopped laying, and ours stopped laying in September. We hadn't had a single egg all winter. Well, we started letting our chickens out and to free range. We usually feed them. You can see they're not even touching the feed anymore. Like, this has been here for 3 days. They don't want it. And apparently everybody who's been feeding their chickens this type of feed has stopped getting eggs. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 eggs today. 7 eggs, yes. 7 eggs in 1 day. We haven't had any for months. Months, y'all. Months. Feed. It's the feed. Everybody's saying it. It's the same thing all across the nation. If you ask people, we're finally figuring it out.
And actually, if you look at how many birds have died or been culled, it's over 100 million birds now. So these were birds, not all of them produced eggs. They weren't all for eggs. A lot of them were broilers, etc. But a lot of them produced eggs, and that's why you're seeing a shorter supply. But this is really where all the theories have started coming in, and that is about the vaccination of birds. So again, I'm not saying I don't think this is correct and that they haven't injected these birds with something. I just don't know. I've looked into the scientific papers on it as well. Let me just see if I can pull this up. Okay. So there's a lot of these very detailed papers on injecting birds with all this sort of stuff. I'm not a medical guy, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really speak into any of that. I'm going to leave any of you, if you want to, in the comments, if you want to read any of those reports, you can make some comments, then everyone who watches the channel can learn from your opinion on this. I don't know that stuff, so I'm not going to get into it. But what it does say on a lot of these articles is that due to this bird flu, that they're going to start vaccinating all of the birds. Now this links in with a story that came out not long ago. They were saying, well, if people aren't willing to take the CV jabs, then we're going to start putting it into the food supply. So I think what's happened is you've got this thing going on here, this thing going on here. A lot of people have put 2 and 2 together and said, that's the reason, this is why the chickens aren't laying eggs. Whereas I think it's a lot more simple than this. Now, the other thing that I noticed as I was reading through a lot of these articles was this article here. And I noticed Tyson Foods kept coming up a lot. Now, I'm not going to read too much into this, But one thing I remember is that Tyson Foods had all of these factory fires last year. So I started doing a bit more research, and this goes right back to 2019, this article. Over 3,800 workers at Tyson Foods beef plant in Kansas out of work after fire. So I started digging a bit deeper and looking at all of these fires, and it is very, very unusual, especially that a lot of these fires are around meat processing plants. And then we had this article, which I talked about on my Friday video, where we've got all these scientists warning that eggs are causing thousands of people to suddenly form blood clots. Now, I've read through the article, and there's loads of these different media outlets and scientists and all these studies saying this. I think this is a load of nonsense, that all of a sudden in the last 18 months, eggs, these things, I mean, what has changed that would cause people to start having blood clots from eggs? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And besides, if you, like me, have looked into this whole blood clot thing, they're not even blood clots, they're mass fibrous clots that are causing the issues that we're seeing at the moment. It's nothing to do with eggs, it's nothing to do with, it's just crazy, all this stuff that keeps coming out. But one thing that I do think is interesting around the chicken feed here is that what actually happened was, as soon as people started talking about it and saying, I switched my chicken feed for goat feed, and they also talked about, well, I'm using this brand, are you using this brand? Yes, I am. And they started talking about all these things, and I gave my chickens some table scraps, next thing I've got eggs. That's when the floodgates open, and everybody sort of isolated it to these one or two types of chicken feed. So I did the research on it. In fact, let me show you now to save the suspense here. And I looked into who owns these and who owns Purina, which was one of them. Well, it's Nestle. So to me, this isn't any, conspiracy or anything that requires a huge amount of really looking into here. You've got a company that is renowned, absolutely renowned for its tactics, shall we say. Look what happened when they went to developing nations with the water bottling plants, diverting the water from villages. That's a big case we know about that the company did. What about what they did in Africa with those women who gave birth, and then they said, here we go, here's this formula. The women got used to using the formula for the babies, their breast milk dried up, and then they bumped up the price of the formula so high that the mothers couldn't afford it. So to me, and again, that's just two, I could give you 50 stories of this company. So when I looked at it, I said, this is obvious. This is absolutely obvious. This new company comes in, buys the feed out, changes the recipe, and next thing, when you look at the accounts, which I'm able to do because I know how to mix all these things together, economics and finance and charts and things like that, as soon as I started looking into it, and these bumper profits and profits have gone up and everything else, it's obvious. They've obviously pulled something out of the chicken feed that was responsible previously for the chickens producing eggs. So, I mean, I don't know what that is, but I'm guessing, let's just say it's a protein. So and we know protein is more expensive. So maybe there was a higher concentration of protein in the chicken feed before. They've removed that, they've put something else in to make it more profitable. Again, I'm just guessing here, by the way. I don't know this for a fact. And then next thing, the chickens stop producing eggs. This seems completely logical to me, as opposed to the whole RNA theory, because why would the chickens all of a sudden, as soon as you switch the feed, start producing eggs again? If they had all this RNA and whatever else in the chicken's body, they wouldn't just start producing eggs again just by switching the food. So that is really what I think's happened here. But there's a lot more to this story, which I want to come on to now, that is very, very suspicious. And I think where there's smoke, there's fire. But just before we come on to that, let me just wrap up this point around what these scientists are saying about people eating eggs. How on earth would they know that it's eggs that's causing this? They wouldn't. I mean, it's so ridiculous. If somebody has a blood clot and dies or something like that, how would the doctors even know it was from eggs? It's not as if they can speak to the person that's died and say, hey, were you, by any chance, were you eating these things, a lot more of these things? Were you ramping up your egg eating over the last 18 months? No. And what if the person lived alone? It's not as if you can ask their spouse or, someone else in their family. And I mean, how else could they do these studies? Did they take spinach and cabbage and bread and all these other things and look at all these things? There's just no way that they could put these findings together and say, over the last 12 to 18 months, it's because of eggs. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. There's just no way they could have done that study and identified it being eggs that quickly. Now, let's get on to the good stuff then. This is what I think is very suspicious about what's happening at the moment. We have got loads of these headlines. This one's from May 31st, 2022. One of the largest egg factories in US torched in the middle of the night amid outbreak of fires, with an S, in food processing facilities across the nation. According to Forsman Farms, which provides more than 3 million eggs, yes, 3 million eggs. The cause of the fire remains a mystery. Now, this is what makes me laugh, because you start looking into all of these food factory and processing facility fires, and it's always a mystery. Why do they keep saying it's a mystery? And how many chickens were killed this time around? Well, law enforcement officials estimate at least 200,000 chickens were killed in the massive flame. The Wright County Sheriff's Office maintains the fire was likely accidental. And there are loads of these stories. I've even gone through the investigation reports as well. And again, it just says mystery or accidental. So I guess that things haven't come as far as we thought in terms of investigations, if they still can't figure out what's causing these fires. Another one, 100,000 chickens were killed in this fire. Charlotte Observer, 34,000 chickens die in poultry farm fires in North Carolina. And again, these stories just go on and on and on and on. More than 500,000 US farm animals died in barn fires in 2022. At least 7 large farm fires occur in the US in the last 10 days. And then we've got a whole list here, of all of these that keep happening, especially when a lot of them keep happening in the middle of the night. Why do we keep hearing this? Oh, this fire just broke out in the middle of the night. Why do these fires never mysteriously break out during the day, when this is when you'd expect fires to break out, when you're doing all sorts of things and you've got machinery running and equipment and everything else? Why do the fires never break out during the daytime? Now, there's another thing you could look at here, and you could look at, say, the insurance industry. And again, I've gone through the statistics and the reports. And yes, before anyone says, Neil, this is normal to have fires, it's just, part of the process. Well, yes, that's correct. But what's actually happened, if you look at the statistics, is that the fires have been more frequent. Let's use that word. I was going to say ramped up, but they've been more frequent within the last 2 years. Now, you've got to ask, why is that? Is it just that people have been off work and they've become more careless? I don't think so, because a lot of these fires are happening in the dead of night. And they're always under mysterious circumstances, or it says accidental. Now, the other thing I think is fairly plausible, maybe some of these smaller companies, and again, I'm not making any accusations, but maybe some of the smaller companies, they're struggling, they might be worried they might be about to go under, things like that. They could set a fire themselves. They could set something up so that a fire accidentally breaks out and they get the insurance money. Again, it's possible. It's happened in the past. Maybe 1 or 2 of these extra fires, that has happened. We are in dire circumstances right now economically. Things are not going good for a lot of companies and producers. That could be a possibility with 1 or 2, but it doesn't explain the massive increase that we have seen. I think this is still unexplained at the moment, but I definitely think there's something unusual, something strange going on here with the food supply, in particular in the USA. But I'm going to leave it to you now in the comments below. Tell me what you think of what is going on at the moment. And again, you can talk about anything that I've mentioned in today's video, but what do you think is actually happening here? Do you think this is all just a big coincidence, or do you think it's a little unusual, as I do? Thanks for watching today. Take care. God bless. I will see you tomorrow.